everybody. It's another Friday, which means it's Fundraisers Friday on the Nonprofit Show. Wow, Tony Beall, where did the week go?
Like always. I mean, every time I see you on Friday, I'm like, yay, happy Friday. And then it was like, didn't we just talk yesterday?
I know. It's crazy fast. I've learned this like new line, and it's like the days are long, but the years are short. And I think I repeated that last week, maybe even. And wow, is that like ever true? And
It's
it's
so
even
true.
it's so true, and even more true when we're talking about in the nonprofit sector connecting internal teams to the mission and the work of the development team.
Mhm.
And so we're going to dig into this today because wow, this is where I think a lot of problems occur. And so Tony, I'm really excited to have this discussion with you. So thank you for being here. We
Likewise.
have some amazing sponsors, and we have a new sponsor on here. We have Bloomerang, American Nonprofit Academy, Staffing Boutique, JMT Consulting, Interim Executives Academy, Your Part-Time Controller, and then Holdings, holdingsforgood.com. They are a bank just dedicated to the nonprofit sector.
Wow.
How cool is that?
So cool.
So cool. We are so excited to welcome them, and we're going to be hearing more about them and from them, but I wanted to, highlight them. Holdingsforgood.com. I'm Julia C. Patrick, joined by the amazing Tony Beall. Thank you, Mr. Beall, for being here.
Of course. I love being here.
Well, let's dig into this dynamic of, I know you're like, of understanding development. And I don't know about you, but I always feel like the development team is the least understood, and that everybody thinks they just go out to lunch and cocktail parties.
It's true. We've talked about that before. This perception, perhaps, of fundraisers and the life they live, right? So especially in today's social media world, where fundraisers are rightfully so promoting the work that they're doing, in an effort to increase visibility of their organization's mission and the work. But a lot of folks see that as like, oh, well, how many ball gowns does she have? And how much is she getting paid that she can afford to have these bedazzled, gowns for all of these, events? And oh, she was, he or she or they were at this, restaurant, and oh, I couldn't get a reservation for 6 months. So, so there are all of those things. Meanwhile, the fundraiser, he, she, they would rather be at home having meatloaf with their significant others and their family than out having lobster many times with, recruiting a donor. And it's not because they don't love what they do, but just because, work-life balance. So there is that perception that it really is, bells, whistles, and parties all the time. And so it's important, this conversation, this topic, that everyone within the organization, including board of directors, have an understanding of what it's like to walk in the shoes of a fundraising professional. And you've listed beautifully on the slide, all of the different areas of responsibility when we talk about understanding development. There's the process of securing the funding. Then there's the cultivation, the stewardship, connecting the organization to community, developing partnerships, and then impact selling. It's really what we do is that we're connecting folks to similar passions that they might have and selling them on wanting to invest in a community need or a solution for their community. That's what impact selling is all about. It's selling them on having a positive impact in the communities in which they work, live, and play.
Right. And I think that it's one of those things in sales, and I think this is in for-profit sales as well. It's easy to fall into the trap that you just need to make the big score, right? And so, you just need to sell the $10,000 handbag if you're in a traditional retail store environment, and life will be great. Or you just need to sell the most expensive house on the block, or the biggest computer system, whatever the heck. And that is not sustainable. We say that all the time in the nonprofit sector, understanding that we're looking at the long term, not just the individual impact sale that we make, that we're looking about building the relationship, how we move forward, how we make that donor part of our mission and our family, if you will, navigating towards that mission. And I'd love to explore this a little bit more with you, because I love how we've listed out the different things that we sell. But I want to understand what you think about this next topic. And it's kind of like, how do we let everybody else in the team know, if you want to use that word, educate them, bring them along?
Sure.
What do we do so that we can re-educate even our own teams
Yes.
about what it is we do?
Yeah. Well, if you don't mind, before I jump into that, I just want to kind of underscore something that you said. And when we talk again about for-profit and nonprofit and strategies and customer retention, if we think of donors and investors as customers, even some of the luxury brands that we might speak about. So, yay, today I sold that $10,000 handbag. Well, I'm not going to hope that they never come back.
Right.
I mean, I'm going to hope that when they're ready to buy another luxury whatever, that they're going to come back to me. So there are systems in place when a luxury brand sells a $10,000 handbag, to stay in touch with that consumer, to invite them to, unique and specific kind of events, and making them aware of when there are sales and when a new version of whatever they bought might be coming out. So just kind of I thought that was a great example. I just wanted to share that even these luxury brands, do a lot in terms of stewardship and cultivation to make sure they don't lose a consumer.
Right, because you need to sell them the $3,000 wallet that goes in the $10,000 handbag, and the $1,500 key fob, right? That goes in, right? I mean, and I think a lot of people can understand that, but we don't always tag that into nonprofit fundraising. But it's right there, don't you think? I mean, like you just said, Tony,
it's right there. But again, speaking about reporting out, and we've talked about this on some of the shows, especially when there's some resistance to kind of the philosophy around sales and a structure in terms of the process for securing gifts. And there's some irony in that, because reporting out means that you have KPIs, OKRs, all of the things that a for-profit sales organization would have in today's nonprofit environment when it comes to reporting the work that's being done. So reporting out, again, just to reiterate what's on the screen here: annual revenue goals, monthly progress and status reports, basic data points, asking for help with connections, and collaboration with programming and funding needs. So a lot of these reports exist. So what processes do you have in place? What are you doing intentionally to connect all of the areas within your organization so they also have this information? Because the data is there. Your development teams are reporting to executive directors, CEOs. They're reporting to the board of directors what's going on. So it's not as if it's a big lift in order to provide this information to the rest of your team. I've worked in organizations where we did this very successfully, and that's because we were very intentional about the internal communication. And we had specific meetings scheduled, whether they be bi-monthly. I think monthly is a bit much, depends on your organizational culture. Bi-monthly, at a minimum, quarterly, intentionally, meetings were set where this information was shared across departments. So it wasn't just about development saying, here's what we've been doing, here's the success of what we've been doing, here are some of our challenges and how you can help us. But also the program department is reporting, and finance is reporting. So every department within the organization has 10 or 15 minutes of spotlight time to really share what's going on within their area of responsibility. and also sharing how others can help support their efforts.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting because I feel like you're spot on with this data is available, even if you have the most, I don't want to say unsophisticated, but entry level system of tracking. But what I think happens, Tony, is that this information, and I've seen it with really large organizations, it just stays in within the department, right? So,
Mhm.
maybe you have a development team of 5 to 10 people. Well, that information is being used and discussed and managed, but just in that silo. And so when you don't move it across the organization, you get this friction or this lack of understanding that we're here talking about today.
And I think we're going to talk about this, throughout today's conversation. But there's just so much connectivity between all of these different, departments within our nonprofit, and I think departments, respecting and recognize that in some organization, that department is one person, right?
Right.
I'm raising the money, I'm delivering the programs, I'm reporting to the board,
Yeah.
like, again, just respecting the different size of organizations from our audience.
Mhm.
So to your point, it exists. It's not a big lift to
Mhm.
get the data, but you have to be really intentional about setting the time for these conversations, to happen. So as a fundraiser, I'm raising funds and getting folks to commit to a particular outcome or deliverable. So when I'm asking a donor to invest in our mission, I'm also saying your investment will help us do X, Y, and Z. Well, the doing is not necessarily the role of development. The doing is the role of programs. So, how do we need to support programs in order to make sure that the doing takes place to the degree that we promised a donor it will happen? There are times where we have the best programs in the world, but maybe the marketing isn't great, or maybe the timing isn't great. So we're not getting kind of the community response or the people signing up, if you will, to
Mhm.
participate in the programs in the way we thought it would, and the way in which we promised our investors and donors that it would.
Yeah.
So all of it is a team sport and a collective effort.
Right. I love the way you phrase that, because it makes it more specific to stewardship as opposed to just task management. That roll your eyes, I got to go to this meeting and they're going to throw a bunch of data, reports and pie charts at me. And I got to pretend like I know what it is and be interested versus moving it towards a different story and the arc of this is what we promised or this is what we can promise. How do we navigate this with transparency to our stakeholders, which is a heck of a big lift.
And again, thinking about today's technology, and you and I in the green room were talking about a project that we're working on, and using Google Docs for us to be able to collaborate. I mean, this doesn't have to be a time consuming convening. You can have a shared Google Doc where each department shares kind of their monthly summary. Everyone goes in, reads it ahead of time. And then when you convene, everyone's already read everyone's updates. And now you can have a really good deep dive conversation around perhaps some of the challenges or roadblocks, and together come up with solutions for those, as opposed to just being presented with that opportunity the moment that we connect, all together.
I think that might be the magical piece for me of the conversation today. I love that you said that because we talk about that a lot in board, governance. This whole thing with the consent agenda, pre-sending information
Sure.
out to your exact point, so that people come to the table and they're not just learning this information at that time. They're mature enough and responsible enough to have engaged in the information, so when they come to the table,
Mhm.
to your point, they can have a generative discussion, they can ask questions, and they can have a stronger time of efficiency.
Mhm.
right? Versus just sitting, any questions? No. Okay, next,
Right.
you know. Because I mean, we'll talk about this at the end, but I think there's an emotional aspect where when people don't understand something, especially when it's coming from finance or it involves numbers.
Mhm.
I've sat on enough boards to see this time and time again. People are reticent to say, "I'm sorry, I don't understand that."
Mhm.
They might challenge you or be combative or whatever, but to say, "Me, I can't understand this or I can't read this."
Right.
And so what happens? It just gets glossed over,
It does.
and that's not healthy. So
Nope.
really interesting. Go ahead. I interrupted you.
No, I said nope. I was agreeing with you 100%.
Okay, well, let's move on to this
Yeah.
next thing, and that is fundraising is everyone's business, the mindset. Um, we talk about this, but I don't think we necessarily model it in all of our organizations. What do you see here?
Yeah, so I do see, I mean, I see both. I see the organizations that are really healthy around this, and
Yeah.
that's because they have really created a culture of philanthropy within their organization. And one of the ways you start developing a culture of philanthropy within your organization is empowering your team members to be able to go out there and participate in philanthropy. And so, again, I've worked with organizations where you had a couple of days of paid time off where you could go and volunteer for an organization and spend your day just really in community service. So I think that that's a really great place for organizations to start when they think about how do I build a culture of philanthropy within my organization. And oftentimes, if your organization, has that kind of benefit for your team members, then team members will report out on that. So it's not as if you have the day off and you just go do this thing in a silo. You kind of write up a little summary, no more than one or two paragraphs
Right.
about your experience and who you spent your time with, and then that gets shared. Encouraging our team members to be philanthropists, to make contributions to organizations. Yeah,
Mhm.
it's great if they want to contribute to the organization that they work for, but that doesn't matter. As long as we are encouraging folks either through matching gifts, which doesn't
Right.
happen a lot in nonprofit, but just
Bill?
again, just encouraging folks to contribute in some way, shape, or form, $10 a month to an organization so that then they can really understand what it feels like to be a donor, what it feels like to participate in a recurring kind of donation environment, but also to know what it feels like if the stewardship isn't good. I made a donation, no one reached out. I made a donation, I got, a thank you, but it was so obvious that everyone got the same thank you that it didn't really mean much to me. So they look at the development work differently when they come to these convenings and talk about what the development team is doing because they have this lived experience as a donor themselves, because us as an organization have encouraged them to be so.
Right. I love that you said that. Wow, does that ring my bell? Yesterday, I was at lunch with somebody in our sector, and they brought up a donor experience that their mother had. It was a minimal donation. It was like a $50 donation to an organization that she really wasn't that familiar with. The person who made this, and she had four touches from different people. One, which was a thank you from an actual client.
Mm.
And this woman was just blown away and basically has made a deeper commitment to this organization based on those touches. I mean, we call them touches, but
Sure.
those responses. And what a great story and what a great reminder, because it wasn't just the development department, right? It was, to your point, everyone's business, and they took people from this organization
And
to
that's a great reminder. I mean, it doesn't sound like this particular donor had any sort of hidden agenda, and I use that term just because that's what came to mind. But we know for a fact that there are many significant large donors that test the waters in this way. They'll send $50 to a handful of organization and see what the reaction is like, and then might make a determination for a much more significant donation just based on how they were treated from that $50.
I love that you brought that up because that's reminiscent of the mystery shopper, right? Like where you go into, it's pretty much a profession. You go into anything from a pizza parlor to, the swankiest, retailer, and you have an experience and then you report back on it. And then it goes back to the organization so that they can see what occurred versus what they think occurs. And I think that's like where we are. We think, oh, well, we have a system in place and we do this, and that. And yet it needs to be tested, right?
Well, and that's where, and maybe we should think about a show just around customer service for nonprofits, but it's really all about, customer service. And just real quickly, I'll give you an example. So, I'm on our local AFP board, and a donor reached out. They couldn't find they couldn't find the acknowledgement receipt or anything kind of supporting their donation. And so they asked for a couple of documents. And so I wanted to respond with those documents, but going a step further and providing them a few other documents that they didn't ask for that I thought would be beneficial to answering their question. Yeah. So it's not always about just fulfilling the initial question, but forecasting what other questions might be asked based on just the fulfillment of that one question. And I think that has something to do with customer service and really thinking about your customer, and in this case, your customer is your donor.
I love that. And I think that's definitely going to be on an upcoming show, because you are right. We need to be thinking that. And it goes back to, impact selling. So, I mean, it shouldn't be a shock to anyone. We should be thinking this way, and our teams should be thinking about this way. We just talked briefly about that new donor who had a staff member outside of development call and thank her, as well as somebody that was involved in the programming, a client. How do you think that we can get program staff to really share with donors? Is that appropriate? Does that work? How do we kind of link those people through?
Yeah, well, I think program staff is incredibly important because that's where your stories are created.
Yeah.
Right? The stories that you're telling as a fundraiser, the stories that marketing is telling, those stories come from program staff. They come from the results driven by the work that program staff is doing. So I think the connectivity is so important, especially between development, programming, and marketing.
Yeah, now, I love that you added marketing. That's
because marketing, program staff creates the stories. Marketing and development tell the stories. Mm-hmm. So there really has to be that connectivity between those departments. Again, if you're fortunate enough to have separate departments for all of that. But program staff also, particularly, I think, for grant writers, program staff need to understand that process and understand their responsibility in delivering on the promise that we often make in our grant proposals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that you said that, because that is one, I think, of the biggest things I hear from finance teams is that they feel like blindsided and tackled by commitments that the grant writers or development makes, and then finance will take care of it, and where they should have communicated this up front to see if it was even viable or it could be done, or that they would know, finance in particular would know what was going on and what they had to do. So I agree, it's just another one of those busting down the silos with the biggest, sledgehammer that you can to make the
Totally.
organization whole. I mean, really interesting. We don't have a lot of time left, but I do want to end today's conversation with this emotional intelligence issue. I revealed to you in the green room this point, and this question came to me because I was working with an organization in my state that works in my region, and I asked the C-suite if they knew during this meeting what the development goals were, and none of them did. And so the development director was deflated, took it personally. He was like, what the hell? I go to work every day. I'm out in the community. I'm traveling, and you all don't know what I'm trying to do. And it was just a really interesting thing. But many of them revealed that they felt that they didn't want to put more pressure on this development director and his group because they were fearful that if he wasn't successful, that they wouldn't have jobs.
Yeah, so communication, there's a lot I could say about that particular scenario and example. I think about the budgeting and how the board was involved in maybe the budgeting process and and all of that. But I think that this comes to, again, kind of what is the culture like in the organization? What are your norms? And creating that culture that where folks aren't fearful to ask a question. No one's going to shoot the messenger. No one's going to think less of you because you had, the chutzpah, if you will, to ask this, this one particular question. There are no dumb questions. When we are looking for clarity and understanding in the spirit of being the best we can possibly be for our communities, there are no dumb questions. There's no room for ego when it comes to being the best we can be for the communities we serve. Yeah. And that definitely should not get in the way. But it's also a lot about being intentional in the way in which we frame our conversations and the way in which we frame our questions. So just real quickly, again, my local AFP, I'm the president-elect, so I'm getting more involved in certain conversations and planning that's taking place. And so today I asked someone leading one of our committees if I could join a meeting that they have scheduled with someone for next week. And I said, this is not a vote. What did I say? Oh, it was not a vote. It has nothing to do with lack of confidence. It just has everything to do with me becoming more aware and making sure I can support you in the best possible way. Right. So by framing it that way, they were like, oh, I can do that, as opposed to saying, can you invite me to that meeting? I first said, this isn't a lack of trust. Yeah. or whatever it was I actually said. This really is all about me becoming more educated and familiar, not only in what's going on, but also becoming more familiar with how I can best support you. So in that spirit, may I be invited to attend your next meeting?
Love it. I think that's brilliant. And that, God, is that like the definition of emotional intelligence or whatever? Good for you, because that's just a great spirit with which to work and to lead. So that AFP chapter is really lucky to have you.
Well, thanks. We'll see.
Well, we are really lucky to have you. We have the amazing Tony Beall, who is the CEO and founder of Mr. Nonprofit Consultancy. I'm Julia C. Patrick, CEO of the American Nonprofit Academy. If you've got questions, if you've got concerns, maybe you don't agree with us, bring them on, baby. You can reach out to us on social. We are everywhere all the time. Or you can email directly to info@americannonprofitacademy.com. Hint, hint. This email, if you use that, will go right to Kevin Pace, our executive producer's email. Tony, I don't even know if you knew that.
I did know that.
Did you? So that's really cool. Hey, we had some wonderful comments today. Thank you for everybody that has written in. We got somebody that just wrote in, great conversation. Thank you. So thank you to our viewers and our listeners. They are so powerful, and we are delighted to be with you each and every day. Our partners include Bloomerang, American Nonprofit Academy, Staffing Boutique, JMT Consulting, Interims Executive Academy, Your Part-Time Controller, Fundraisers Friday, where we are today, and of course, Holdings for Good, our newest partner, and they are a bank just for nonprofits. Super cool. I'm so excited to have them with us. So, all right, Tony, my friend, as we end each and every episode, we leave with this message. And as it is a Friday and we're still fundraising, we want to remind everyone to stay well so you can do well. Thanks, everyone. See you again.